Hey everyone, thanks for being here. Thanks for having us. We really appreciate it. We're really excited to chat with you today a little bit more about personalization. And before we get started, let me introduce myself. My name is Dean De La Peña. I'm the VP at Resonate that looks after our agentic SaaS platform and our data strategy and a lot of the predictive analytics that we bring to bear. For those of you who don't know who we are, Resonate is a company that really focuses on predicting and understanding individual motivations, values, preferences, and using predictive AI for the last decade plus to really isolate and understand that and be able to bring that to bear in marketing on behalf of the brands that we work with. So very excited to chat with you a little bit more about that. Before I do that, let me turn it over to Austin to introduce himself.
Awesome. Thank you, Dean. And good afternoon, everyone. My role, as you can see on the slides, I'm a manager of research and data analytics at Bonneville International. And for those that aren't familiar with Bonneville, we're an integrated media and advertising services company. We have a strong legacy of local media stations that we leverage to ultimately help advertisers and brands and consumers be able to connect with one another. We like to think of ourselves as trusted voices, connecting communities together and lifting them up where we can. And so for me personally, I love data and I love the summit so far. It's been incredible to hear not only where other brands and companies and firms are, but really how much we have in common of what we're seeing as opportunities to improve, being humble with ourselves. I loved that last theme, and the opportunities that we have to continue to move forward and to innovate in that space.
Great. So just to kind of set up for our conversation today, I would love to thank Brand Innovators for having us today and also highlight that they have made a grave mistake, which is they've armed me with a clicker. I have content. So I wanted to just kind of frame up very quickly what we're going to chat about today. I have a lot of questions for Austin related to how we really make AI, how we turn AI into something real, how we actually drive change through the lens of something that Cameron earlier today from IBM actually said really well. It's about humanity and deploying technology in the service of humanity and creating human relationships, which can sometimes sound a little bit paradoxical, right? But AI, it doesn't have to be scary, right? And it is there to help us in what we do best. And in the context of marketing, right, it's really having those conversations and those relationships. And I think, we forget that at our peril, right? Like what we do is about having those discussions, building that relationship, building that engagement so that there's trust and there's excitement on behalf of the consumer to engage with a brand and to make that part of their lives. And, if we miss that ball, it's really easy for us as marketers to kind of feel like, we're just pushing data around a page and being very tactical. And consumers stop feeling recognized. They feel more like targets. And so, a lot of what Austin and we do together is around how we kind of get past that using AI. And, I can tell some stories about the price of mistargeting. I think my favorite is, I was watching TV one night. I live in Chicago. I'm a Virginia resident, born and bred, long time ago. But I've been out for a decade. And one night, as I'm watching TV, I get served a gubernatorial attack ad for the Virginia governor's election in Spanish. My last name is De La Peña. I'm Filipino. I don't come from a Spanish-speaking country. And I'm like, well, this is really irrelevant to my life. And, on one hand, did that really particularly matter? I wasn't voting in that election anyway. No voter fraud here. But at the same time, it's really easy for me to translate that into a missed opportunity, missed spend. And it was a little bit off-putting, right? Like, hey, you got me wrong. I know what you're trying to do, but you got me wrong. And, that just by the numbers, I won't belabor the point, but there's hundreds of millions of dollars for brands at risk, either on the cost side or on missed opportunity in engaging the folks that really expect to be personalized, right? So how do we solve that? That's where understanding comes in, and that's where technology has been so valuable, is to really understand, all right, what makes people tick? Why do they make decisions, right? What are people about, and how can I engage them in a way that's really going to move the needle, right? And, sometimes the way I think about this is, man, if I could have just a quick hour-long conversation with everyone in the country, how powerful would that be? I would know so much more about individuals. We'd be having more of a sales conversation instead of a marketing conversation. That's awesome. right? So let me just I just canvass the group here really fast. 1 hour per person. How long do you think that would take me? Shout it out. Yeah, well,
We're doing math in real time.
300 million hours. Dan got it. Yeah, about 5 times longer than recorded human history. And I don't got that kind of time. So, that's really what Resonate does, is we use AI to solve that problem. We have that conversation through survey and through the data that we collect with our clients. We bring that together for what I call a small group at scale, right? It's a manageable group of a few 100,000 people, not a few 100 million people. And ultimately what we do is we align that to the observed behavior of people online and use predictive AI to scale that out. So we say, look, I know what you care about because I asked you and I see your behavior. Now I look at the behavior of somebody who I haven't had that conversation with, and we use predictive AI to kind of connect those dots. And so that brings me back to a quote I really love from the 1960s, believe it or not. It's like the very advent of AI. It's like the perceptron had just been built. And John Tukey, who's a statistician, said, far better an approximate answer to the right question, which is often vague, than an exact answer to the wrong question, which can always be made precise. In other words, I would much rather answer probabilistically with a little degree of error, but precisely what people actually care about, and are they going to buy my stuff if I ask them to and I start that conversation, than I would having a really precise and exact answer to, hey, are you female, 35, you live in a certain geographic area, maybe you have a Hispanic last name, and you used to live in Virginia, right? So that's ultimately kind of what we do. And, we're increasingly bringing generative AI as part of our most recent technology stack to helping make that a reality. And that's really what I want to talk to Austin about today. And that leads me to my first question, Austin, for you. What does the future look like as you start to deploy these tools and as you start to really use generative and predictive AI in service of that relationship building? And for the right reasons, what does that future look like?
That's a really great question. I think when we think about the future and what it looks like for marketers, it really distills into something simple, and that's an insatiable appetite for information and for answers, right? When we think about ourselves as consumers, we really expect that now, right? In a matter of moments, we should be able to find out what we want to buy, where I should go, what matters, and why. The challenge for brands and marketers is to keep up, right? And being able to anticipate those needs, to not only have an understanding of the consumer, but to make better decisions in real time. And that's where I really appreciate Dean in setting the stage on, being able to tap into actionable intelligence on consumer begins to help you understand, okay, what do we need to do next? And how can we take more intentional decisions in terms of how we're going to reach and engage these type of consumers? And I want to share a blunt truth in this way, is that AI alone by itself doesn't create value, but better decisions do. And I think that's where we're going to continue to see more opportunities to come. And I've heard a lot of that theme is AI is here to help support us to make more intentional decisions. And especially for marketers, that's a powerful tool in our arsenal to be able to meet the needs of consumers in that way. Now, because one thing that's important too is, and I've seen this a lot, especially among my friends that don't work in business or in marketing, is we see a lot of times a lot of teams get really excited about really sophisticated AI outputs, but they're not making any changes from a result of it. And I think that's missed opportunity is if you're seeing a sophisticated output, but you're not changing your strategy, your marketing, perhaps your creative or your process internally, then that's a major misstep. And it's not truly being operational or even leading down the lines of a way of growth in that way.
And Austin, I remember someone saying, I believe it was from Mars earlier today, like 95% of the analytics that are being done, don't necessarily pan out the way people expect. I think that's a big part of it, right? Is that, you're starting to think about, all right, what really matters? What do I really care about? How am I thinking about that? So,
absolutely. And I think one thing this is also a really cool clicker, by the way. I play a lot of video games, and this is actually a really scary design of some of the video games I play. But there's an operational model that we use, and for many of you, I think this will make a lot of sense, right? And it starts with this flow of beginning with insight, going to activation, going to measurement, and then learning, right? And then you rinse and repeat the process. It's very much an active thing. It's not you said it once and forget it, right? That's part of my culture and my upbringing is a sense of lifelong learning. And that's where I think AI is going to continue to drive that, not only for us as marketers, but for us as consumers. So in the insight phase, right, we're learning more about audiences, about consumers, and not just who they are demographically, that's well and good, but even more importantly, why do they do the things that they do? Whether it's the values that drive their decision making or what their financial situation is looking like, and that's why they choose certain products over others. Once we have that greater foundation of consumer understanding, that's when we go to action, right? So to activation. And that's where we begin to create value because we're being intentional with the audiences that we're targeting and that we're messaging to. We're not just going to throw dollars. You don't want to ever say that, right? And one thing that I've heard a lot is that I've loved in this conference is talking about the users that we're trying to serve. And I love that idea. And moving away from targeting consumers or from target audiences, that vernacular, but to intended audiences. Who is the intended that we're looking to benefit in this way? So activation, again, is all about marketing to that audience, selecting the right media channels, and intentional use of them in that way. Measurement is really important, and I loved the conversation from the previous panel. This is an area that I think is going to continue to evolve and innovate with time with various measurement solutions that try to do our best in understanding whether from a strong directional point or accurate point of how somebody came to understand our product or service or our brand. Measurement in this case is really important because that's going to be your guardrails of understanding, okay, is our marketing strategy, is our process working? And that measurement system has to be built on top of business value. And that looks different for every business, right? Well, except for revenue. I think we're all on the same page. Revenue is really important from what we heard earlier. And as this process continues, that'll feed into the learning model where you're able to see, okay, what worked, what didn't, how can we improve? We failed, okay, let's get up and try again. And time again, as you follow this type of process, this is where you'll begin to see growth and learning and improvement. And I think one thing that's really powerful about predictive AI and AI in general is it's meant to incite change. It's meant to serve. And at Bonneville International, one of our how do I say this, like slogan or taglines is trusted voices, and I love that. And one of the things that we do for the brands that we work with is we're translating this predictive insight, this data, to drive actionable targeting and marketing plans for the brands partners that we work with. And one thing that AI should always change in the sector of marketing in particular are three things. Ultimately, who you're going to target, right? And one thing that's really important about that is I think more and more we're seeing I want to be careful how I say this, not the archaic, but the legacy model of, just trying to reach everybody. Because consumers at the end of the day are all valuable, but not all of them hold the same value for a business. So being able to identify those that have the most value or the highest propensity to engage with you is of significant advantage. Next, AI should be able to change what you're optimizing toward based off of your business value, right? So if we're looking towards qualified leads, let's make sure our targeting and our model is optimized to do the same. And then lastly, ultimately, where you're going to invest by understanding we're going to focus on these segments because they have the highest propensity to engage, as well as these are the channels that we know they're engaged on and why we need to focus there. One of the beautiful things I see with marketing consumer research, especially coming out of Resonate, is it gives us more intention to be able to do what we need to. We're doing it with purpose.
So Austin, is it fair to say that's a little bit of where you're really using kind of the why behind what consumers do, how they react, what they're going to have to say when you connect with them, and then looks like you're about to go into an example?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Didn't mean to get ahead of you there. But no, absolutely. And that's what I think is so powerful about understanding the why, right? how many of us have ever walked into a store and we were approached by a rep of some sort, and they just immediately give you the canned message, right? We just start blowing them off, right, in our mind. Hopefully we're really nice to them because they're trying to do a job and a living. But one thing that becomes powerful is when we unlock the why and unlock that predictive intelligence, we can drive considerable growth and impact. And one opportunity I'd like to share with you that we did was for a luxury modular home builder, where we were able to take this predictive insight and intelligence and infuse it into their marketing strategy. And the results were tremendous. What we ultimately changed was who they're targeting, right? By understanding that consumer segment they were trying to go after even further, and even looking at their website visitors and how they were a little bit off, they were attracting somebody else, we were able to realign them and focus on key consumer affluent segments in the marketplace. And then when it came to what we did, we wanted to continue to focus on the brand value and striving to not just generate volumes of leads for them, but quality leads, continue to refine that approach. And in turn, we deployed marketing tactics and display and search campaigns, infusing and activating the data that we were able to surface to lead with intent, to lead with value. And we saw a lot of things come through as a result of this campaign. Being a previous media buyer, I was initially concerned because we were like, hey, the client's like, we're seeing all these leads come in. And I'm like, oh man, what's happening in this campaign right now? Let's take a look. But what was powerful was they were getting record leads, but the lead quality maintained as a result. So we were getting more at the same or better value. Their cost per acquisition dropped by upwards of 80%, which is phenomenal in media buying in that way. But ultimately, we were able to pair the right consumer with the right business and solution. So we were helping to connect that consumer to what they were looking for in the long term. And again, when we're able to leverage AI to operationalize and incorporate it into our marketing efforts or into our business flow, we can make great things happen. And, sorry, clicked the wrong button. So what are some of the things that become possible, I think, for marketers when you operationalize AI? Is a number of different things. When it comes to consumers and that predictive insight that you're able to take advantage of, you can anticipate demand rather than kind of being stuck in the past on what they clicked last, for example, or what they were thinking about. You're able to take advantage of the opportunity sooner. Again, when we think about being more intentional with who we market and target, you're beginning to generate more efficiency in your marketing spend. You're reducing waste in that way. You can personalize your messaging with intent rather than just saying, okay, I think this type of person tends to like this type of image. They like cats, so I'm going to feature a cat in my image, right? But that's a bad example. I love cats. But instead, being able to personalize your messaging so when you do reach them, it has the best impact. And in turn, you have a powerful model that continues to learn and adapt as consumers change. So I think when it comes to the future of marketing and what that looks like for marketers, I think it's ultimately this value of what AI is, right? It isn't solely in what it tells you, it's in what it changes. So what decisions are you making today that will produce better outcomes for tomorrow?
Love it. And, Austin, you touched on this a little bit around vanity metrics, thinking about, sort of unlocking the humanity, going after really what matters to the brand. And when you're saying, hey, the value of AI isn't what it tells you, it's what it changes, right? Something that's sort of fundamental to that thesis is you're changing something that's important. Mm-hmm. So how do you think about differentiating what's really important and what your focus is? This was actually, I think, discussed in some of the other panels that we've seen today around, hey, focus on the key thing that matters, right? How do you think about differentiating that in different situations and using AI to really unlock that value as opposed to the vanity metric?
That's a great question. We've heard a lot about business value, right? What's important to our business as an organization, and using that as a lens to why we do what we do. Maybe that's your company values. Maybe that's perhaps your customer or an agency or client that you're working with and what they're ultimately trying to accomplish. And I think as you come to understand where you're trying to go and the value, that should help fuel and motivate everything that you do in your process when it comes to marketing. So if you have, again, a good sense of what's important to your brand, to your company, but ultimately to the people you're trying to serve, you can better meet that need in that way. Like with Mars earlier, I loved the idea. It's actually on my shopping list. I'm getting Skittles. I need that to get through a week, right? Or whatever it might be. But that's where I think, as a consumer myself, I love brands and marketing that do it with intent and not just for the sake of getting a message out. You can quickly tell when it's that type of brand.
Excellent. And I know that we are standing between you and lunch, so I will ask one last question.
Yeah, go ahead.
What advice do you have, as you're thinking about working through that problem? And for the group here, what advice do you have in sort of deploying AI and how you guys have done that today?
Oh, man, that's a great question. I think I will say there's been a lot of great gems that have been shared by all the panelists today. So I'll thank those that have shared a lot of those thoughts. I would commend a lot of the things that were shared today, and as well as for those that will continue to share later on. I think a couple things I'll just speak very briefly on this is, one, it's easy to look at AI outputs and think, okay, we're doing it. We're in the process of doing this. We're doing AI. We're doing it. But it can be easy to overlook the whole purpose and intent of why you were trying to implement it in the first place. So watch yourself and routinely, maybe on a quarterly, monthly basis, say, okay, we've developed this AI agent. How is it being used? And it's okay if it didn't work out in the first run. That's why we have the multiple versions, like was mentioned earlier, in that way. And so be patient with yourselves when things don't work, but be curious. If something didn't work, ask why. Ask the AI agent or the AI model, see what it comes up with in a way too. But don't lose sight of your human intuition and human element with AI. It could be so easy. I loved the gentleman earlier that was talking about how much of a better writer he is. I feel that way too with AI. I can improve my writing, but it can be easy to let that become the crutch for you. So always do more self-exploration, audit yourselves in that way. But and I think, especially in the age of AI, it's a massive innovation and a disruption for many. But in those situations, I always firmly believe that a disruption is much like a wave at a beach, right? You can try to swim into it and just smash your way through it, and that can end up in a couple of different scenarios. Or you can try to ride the wave through, whether you're a surfer or whether you're just going to calmly come back to the shore. So again, with AI, don't be afraid to embrace it, to learn, make mistakes, and try again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dean.